Mid-morning edition of Arirang News. I'm Mark Broom. Let's start with a look at the day's headlines. Fun in the sun and a round of golf, or tough talks on trade in North Korea. Probably some of the former and plenty of the latter as US President Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe get ready for 2 days of talks in Florida. South Korea's female footballers do the nation proud, advancing to the 2019 Women's World Cup in France. They seal their spot with a 5-0 win over the Philippines. Plus, the rift between Western nations and Russia is deepening over a suspected chemical weapons attack in Syria. So let's start in sunny Florida, where Donald Trump and Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe are meeting at the US President's Mar-a-Lago resort. Abe, who's set for 2 days of talks with President Trump, is expected to bring up trade and investment ties between the two countries. As of now, Japan is the only major American ally not promised an exemption from the Trump administration's hefty new tariffs on steel and aluminium. While trade is a key topic, Abe is also eager to avoid what's being dubbed a Japan passing amid the ongoing talks for denuclearization on the Korean peninsula. Trump and Abe are expected to focus heavily on North Korea and its nuclear weapons program, as Pyongyang has demonstrated a number of times that its ballistic missiles can hit Japan. With the landmark US-North Korea summit set to take place next month, the Kim Jong-un regime is looking to improve its ties with its longtime ally China. The feeling is mutual from Beijing as well, with China's leader said to be interested in visiting Pyongyang in June. Kim Hyo-sun with the details.
Chinese President Xi Jinping might visit North Korea in June, following the summit between Washington and Pyongyang. Citing multiple sources, Japanese daily Yomiuri reported that the matter appears to have been discussed between the regime's leader Kim Jong-un and Song Tao, a senior Chinese diplomat, visiting Pyongyang with a Chinese art delegation. Although Beijing's foreign ministry did not confirm the details of the discussion, it did say that high-level exchanges play a crucial role in the relationship between the two allies.
Not long ago, President Xi Jinping said that he would like to keep in touch with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un in the new era through exchanges, envoy visits, messages to each other, and other methods to maintain constant contact.
Mending its relations with Beijing appears to be crucial for North Korea, especially with its scheduled summit with Washington. And China, on its part, appears to be trying to ramp up its influence over the Korean peninsula by improving its relations with Pyongyang at a time when Washington-Beijing tensions remain high. The Pyongyang performance by the Chinese art troupe is also a sign of warming ties between Beijing and the North after Kim's landmark visit to the Chinese capital last month. Kim Hyo-sun, Arirang News.
Now, North Korea usually celebrates its founder Kim Il-sung's birthday with various cultural and military events. This year, the regime decided to keep it decidedly low-key, but Pyongyang provided a special welcome to a Chinese delegation to strengthen relations with Beijing, as we just heard a little bit about. Our Jung-hee sheds light on the North's adjustments made ahead of its summits, not only with Seoul, but with Washington.
Until last year, North Korea has celebrated April 15th, the birthday of the regime's founder, Kim Il-sung, by not only holding various arts and sports events, but showing off its military power. In 2017, the North launched a Hwasong-12 intermediate-range ballistic missile and held a large-scale military parade. In 2016, the regime fired a Musudan IRBM. But this year, no particular military movements of such kind were reported, and Pyongyang, at its national meeting commemorating the founder's birthday, made no mention of its nuclear power. Celebrations were mostly focused on festivals and the current leader, Kim Jong-un, paying tribute. The regime seems to have adopted a low-key policy ahead of its highly anticipated summits with South Korea and the US. But at the same time, North Korea is also strengthening relations with China. Over the weekend, Song Tao, the head of the Chinese ruling party's International Liaison Department, arrived in Pyongyang leading China's art troupe to celebrate Kim Il-sung's birthday. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met him face-to-face, unlike Song's previous visit last November. Pyongyang state-run Korean Central News Agency reported Kim and Song discussed issues of mutual concern and the international situation, which could highly likely mean upcoming Washington-Pyongyang summit. Kim is known to have said it is his duty as, quote, a close friend to welcome and specially treat the delegation as they were directly sent by Chinese President Xi Jinping.
If North Korea holds talks with the U.S. without improving its relations with China, then it will have a very unstable base to fall back on. China won't be able to minimize or abolish international sanctions, but it can provide other kinds of support, such as daily necessities and rice.
Meanwhile, on Sunday, Kim Jong-un's wife Lee Seol-ju watched a Chinese artist's performance, and for the first time, Pyongyang state media called Lee the First Lady. She's been referred to only as Kim Jong-un's wife beforehand. Experts interpret this as a sign of the regime trying to place itself at the same level with other nations. Lee has also accompanied Kim's summit with Xi Jinping and stood alongside China's First Lady Peng Li-wian. 오정희, Arirang News.
April 27th, that's the day history will be made. The leaders of the two Koreas will meet at the truce village of Panmunjom on the southern side of the border. Kim Jong-un will become the first North Korean leader to ever step onto South Korean soil. But with the last summit happening more than a decade ago, do Seoul and Pyongyang finally have a golden chance now to make these kind of exchanges more regular? Lee Seung-jae takes a closer look.
The truce village of Panmunjom, located some 60 kilometers north of Seoul, is set to greet a very important guest at the end of the month, as North Korean leader Kim Jong-un will make the unprecedented step of crossing of the border for the 2018 Inter-Korean Summit. Panmunjom, a site that symbolizes the division of the two Koreas, will soon be a historic venue for reconciliation, as President Moon Jae-in and Kim will gather there on April 27th. Panmunjom is also where the Korean War Armistice Agreement was signed in 1953, ending the fight, but leaving the two Koreas technically in a state of war to this day. With the two previous inter-Korean summits in 2000 and 2007 being held in Pyongyang, many hope the Panmunjom summit will finally bring lasting peace to the Korean peninsula. And the South Korean government hopes the first inter-Korean summit on the south side won't be the last. Officials say they want it to be the first of many summits to happen in Panmunjom until the two Koreas finally unify once again. With that in mind, the South has already started to renovate the Peace House at Panmunjom to greet North Korean delegates ahead of the Inter-Korean Summit, leading up to the meeting between the two leaders. Koreans from all corners of the peninsula hope that Panmunjom, for so long a symbol of division, may become a symbol of peace as the regular meeting place for the leaders of the two Koreas. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Now, as we all pretty much know by now, in response to Bashar al-Assad's recent chemical attack on civilians, the US, Britain and France launched precision airstrikes at 3 different targets in Syria last weekend. While the attack was designed to send a strong message to Assad and his allies in Russia and Iran, there are also concerns over its knock-on effects outside of the region, including how it could alarm North Korea. Cha Sang-mi reports.
President Trump addressed the U.S. from the White House last Friday local time, saying he had given the order for the U.S. military, in conjunction with Britain and France, to launch airstrikes on Syria. The airstrikes came around a week after an alleged chemical weapons attack on civilians in the rebel-held town of Douma on April 7th. The Pentagon confirmed the airstrikes hit 3 sites, a scientific research facility in the capital Damascus, and chemical weapons storage facilities, as well as an important command post near homes. Speaking at a briefing late Friday, U.S. Defense Secretary James Mattis said the strikes were to send a strong message to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad.
But right now, this is a one-time shot, and I believe that it sent a very strong message to dissuade him, to deter him from doing this again.
And there's some debate over that message and whether it was simply targeting the Syrian president or also aimed at North Korean leader Kim Jong-un ahead of the expected U.S.-North Korea summit.
The North Korea would kind of feel, frightened or concerned about the recent strike on Syria. Clearly the focus of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is how his regime would be guaranteed its security and safety.
However, another expert says the United States has been taking a very different approach for the Middle East and North Korea, and Washington was always hesitant to use direct military power against Pyongyang.
There was always a very wide divergence between U.S. policies toward the Middle East and North Korea than in the case of North Korea, even if there was some need to react to North Korean challenges, always the U.S. avoided to use military force. So I think that the Syrian airstrikes will not alarm North Korea overmuch.
The expert added that rather than the airstrikes against Syria, Pyongyang will be more interested in the U.S. relationships with Russia and China, and that the U.S. trade war with China and confrontation with Russia over Syria could benefit Pyongyang when it comes to negotiations with Washington. Cha Sang-mi, Arirang News.
Now, in other news, the U.S. Commerce Department is banning American companies from selling components to China's leading telecom equipment maker, ZTE, for 7 years for violating the terms of a sanctions violation case. ZTE allegedly violated the terms of a 2017 settlement where the company pleaded guilty in a Texas federal court to illegally shipping U.S. equipment to North Korea and Iran. The company paid $890 million in fines and penalties, with an additional penalty of $300 million that could also be imposed. The action is seen as another addition to the mounting pressure on Chinese telecommunications companies and a broader escalation of the tariff tussle between Washington and Beijing. South Korea and China are to resume discussions on fisheries cooperation nearly 2 years after talks were halted. Foreign affairs sources say the two countries will hold their 10th South Korea-China meeting on fisheries cooperation in China next week. Illegal Chinese fishing boats in the West Sea is one of the key issues Korea has been raising and will likely bring up again in the coming discussions. The last meeting took place in Gwangju in July 2016. Before the meetings were stopped after relations between Seoul and Beijing soured a lot following the deployment of the THAAD missile defense system in South Korea. Now for a look at stories making headlines around the world, and the rift between the West and Russia is getting worse over a suspected chemical weapons attack in Syria. The global chemical weapons watchdog says its experts are being blocked by Syrian and Russian authorities from entering the alleged attack site. For more on this and a range of other international news, let's turn to our Noah Adam. So Adam, let's start with Syria. What's the latest?
Well, Mark, the UK says inspectors from the Organisation for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons were blocked Monday from entering the site in Douma despite having UN clearance. The US says that is because Syria and its allies are trying to tamper with evidence on the ground. In an interview with the BBC, however, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov denied that was the case. He blamed the delays on retaliatory US-led missile strikes on Syria, which were held over the weekend. He also said the US and its allies had no proof of the alleged poison gas attack, saying that any evidence they claim to have is from media reports and social media. The United States and France say they have proof of such an attack took place, but haven't yet made that evidence public. Inspectors from the OPCW would be able to establish what happened and who was to blame if they entered the site. They travelled to Syria last week to inspect the site, but have yet to gain access to Duma, which is now under government control. But the Russian military said they will be allowed to visit the site on Wednesday. Meanwhile, President Trump has reportedly put a stop to plans to impose additional sanctions on Russia over its role in the alleged attack. U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, had told a CBS interview that sanctions would be announced on Monday. U.S. media have quoted White House officials as saying that Trump conferred with his national security advisors after Haley's announcement, but was uncomfortable with approving economic sanctions at this time. In other news, rapper Kendrick Lamar has won this year's Pulitzer Prize for music, becoming the first non-classical or jazz artist to win the prestigious prize. The Pulitzer board said Monday that he was awarded for his Grammy-winning album Damn, which it described as a virtuosic song collection that captures the modern African-American life. Meanwhile, the New York Times and New Yorker were jointly awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Public Service for their reporting on sexual harassment allegations against Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein. Their stories served as a catalyst for the #MeToo movement. Starbucks says a manager at one of its stores in Philadelphia has left the company after protests erupted stemming from last week's arrest of 2 black men. The coffee giant has been under fire for racial profiling after the manager called police accusing the pair of trespassing. A woman who shot the video of last Thursday's incident said the 2 men were waiting for a friend without making a purchase, which she added was a common occurrence. Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson issued an apology again for what he called the reprehensible arrests and will be meeting with the 2 men soon.
Now, from one corporate scandal in the US to one closer to home. 4 years ago, the daughter of Korean Air's chairman made headlines pretty much everywhere around the world for ordering a taxiing plane to head back to the gate because she was unhappy with how her nuts were served. Now, another daughter of this chairman is also in hot water for her own outrageous display of entitlement. Kan Hyung-woo with the details.
Korean Air is once again under fire. Last week, Senior Vice President Hyun-min, daughter of the company's chairman, made headlines for allegedly throwing a bottle of water at an advertising firm manager in a meeting last month. Jo denies throwing the bottle at the man, but admits that she did push him. Korean Air officials said Monday that Jo has been removed from her duties until police finish investigating. And audio recordings newly released by local internet news media revealed Jo yelling at another person presumed to be a subordinate. Although she has apologized for what she called her foolish behavior, local police launched a preliminary investigation after the incident was first reported. The police are said to be looking into whether the heiress abused her power or broke any laws. Jo's powerful family has been embroiled in scandal before. Jo Hyun-min is the younger sister of Cho Hyun-ah, infamous for the so-called nut rage incident 4 years ago, in which she ordered a taxiing aircraft back to the gate in New York because she was unhappy with the way a flight attendant had served her macadamia nuts. Cho Hyun-ah was found guilty of violating aviation law and sentenced to a year in jail, but she was released after an appeal. A petition launched last Friday on the website of the presidential office has so far been signed by more than 55,000 Koreans, demanding that the airline remove the word Korean from its name and stop using a Korean national symbol as its logo, saying the owner's behavior degrades the country and the company. In their reports, foreign news outlets have explained the concept of gapjil, the unfortunate cultural practice of some executives in Korea who abuse subordinates and contractors. Kan Hyung-woo, Arirang News.
Now, the Seoul Central District Court says Park Geun-hye has waived her right to an appeal against its ruling in her first trial. The court early this month handed the ex-president a prison sentence of 24 years and fined her roughly $17 million. She was found guilty of 16 offences, including bribery, abuse of power and leaking state secrets. The deadline for Park to appeal was last Friday. However, she did not do so. An appeal filed by her sister now loses effect as well. Despite her waiver, a second trial on a supplementary indictment begins today. Park is alleged to have interfered with the 2016 general elections by using illegal opinion polls as a way to nominate candidates friendly to her. South Korea stood silent on Monday to mark the 4th anniversary of the Sewol-ho ferry sinking, one of the darkest days in the country's modern history. A special ceremony remembering the hundreds who were lost was held in Ansan, the city in which many of the victims called home. Park Geun-hye reports.
April 16, 2018 marks the 4th anniversary of the tragic Sewol-ho ferry disaster. For the first time, a government-sponsored special ceremony was held at the Hwarang Amusement Park in Ansan, Gyeonggi-do Province to honor the victims. Ansan is home to Danwon High School, which lost 261 of its students and teachers. The service was attended by around 5,000 people, including Prime Minister Lee Na-kyun, political party leaders, and ordinary citizens.
As a parent myself, I feel terrible every time I come here. I came today because it's the only time I can be with the victims.
My eldest child is the same age as the victims. That day, I saw my son come back from school and could not imagine what the victims' parents must have been going through. I think this is the only way we can be with the victims, so I came.
Heartbreak was visible at the ceremony, especially among the families of the victims, who for 4 years could find neither peace nor closure, with no clear answers as to why the ferry sank or why the victims could not be saved.
The Moon administration will always remember this tragedy. We will uncover the entire truth, learn from it, and do our best to make Korea a safe country. We will not allow the victims to have died in vain.
Today's ceremony has even more meaning because the memorial facility here in Ansan will be pulled down after the 4th anniversary. It was a significant place that was visited by more than 720,000 people who wanted to remember and pay their tributes to the victims. The facility will be transformed into a memorial park for the victims to be remembered forever. And after 4 years, everything from photos to records will be sent to the National Archives of Korea following the wishes of the families. Park Geun-hye, Arirang News, Ansan.
Now moving on to a much happier story for South Korea. While the South Korean men's national football team prepares for the upcoming World Cup in Russia, now just around 55 days away, the women's national team have qualified for the 2019 FIFA Women's World Cup after finishing 5th at a continental football tournament. The 16th ranked South Korean team beat the Philippines 5-0 on Monday in the 5th place match at the AFC Women's Asian Cup in Jordan. It's the 3rd consecutive time for the South Korean women's team to qualify, and 24 teams will be competing in next year's tournament, which will be hosted by France.
Good morning. Much of Korea is set to be bathed in sunshine again, along with mild daily highs, while Beijing will have unseasonably warm temperatures nearing 30 degrees Celsius until Friday. A high-pressure ridge in the west will lead to sunny skies for most parts here in South Korea, with highs reaching 20 degrees Celsius for most cities on the map, including here in the capital, while Gyeongju will reach up to 19 degrees. However, those of us in the capital area and Chungcheongdo provinces are likely to see dusty conditions for most of the day, while the rest of the country should have normal air. Wide fluctuations in temperatures will continue under mostly sunny skies for the remainder of the week. With that, let's take a look at the international weather for viewers around the world. So most of South Korea will have sunny skies with mild daily highs today. Most of North Korea will have plenty of sunshine with mild daily highs as well. And as for the rest of Asia, good news for farmers in India. The nation is likely to receive average monsoon rains in 2018. Meanwhile, those of you in Wellington will see rain showers along with strong gusts today. Heading to North America, the freezing rain warning was lifted in Montreal, but expect to see more freezing rain, snow, and even ice through Thursday. And as for South America, other than Bogota, most major cities will be under mostly sunny skies. Taking you to Europe, Rome has been covered in dust from the Sahara Desert as Italy experiences a series of weird weather conditions. Lastly, to Africa, Cairo will be sizzling hot into Wednesday with an expected high of 36 degrees Celsius. And that's all the weather update for now.
Well, that's where we're going to leave the news for now. Our next bulletin is coming up at noon Korea Times. Until then, goodbye.
A call for peace on the peninsula from Germany, a nation that has unified